The road home was dust-blind and lonely, a trail carved through bone-dry chaparral and the silence of things left unsaid. Jonas Bly rode slow, the sway of his mare familiar under him, saddlebags weighted with flour, coffee, a spool of twine, and a fresh hinge for the barn door he'd been meaning to fix since winter. The wind had teeth, even in spring, and it bit through his coat, stirring the long grass into whispers that felt too much like memories. That's when he saw her at first. Just a shape beneath the cottonwood, a tree half-dead, bark peeled raw. By storms, its limbs skeletal against the pale sky. Something hung from it, swinging. Not fully. Not dead. Jonas stopped his horse with a quiet tug on the reins. The mare stomped once, uneasy. A girl. Apache by the looks. Young. Maybe 16. Maybe younger. Her wrists were tied cruel with wire, arms stretched above her like she'd been left for the birds. Blood crusted down her face. A sign nailed to the tree above her head flapped in the wind, crudely carved words, "White man don't forgive." She was alive, barely. Jonas didn't speak, didn't curse or cry out. He dismounted like a man stepping into someone else's grave. The wind rattled the dry branches overhead. Cut a pocket knife. He cut the wire loose. Her bloody slumped. He caught her before she hit the dirt. She weighed near nothing. Her eyes flickered open. Just once dark animal eyes that didn't see him. Just something behind the veil of pain and time. Then they closed again. Jonas looked at the sign. Then, at the horizon, then at her. He buried the sign under flat stones a dozen yards off. No ceremony, no cross. Then he lifted the girl into his saddle, tied her limp form to the horn with a blanket, and walked the horse the 5 miles home. The sun had just begun to slip behind the western rim by the time he reached the cabin. The wind had changed. Colder now, quieter. Coyotes yipped far off, as if announcing something holy or wicked. He laid her down on the cot in the spare room, the one that hadn't been used since his wife died. The bed creaked under the weight of 2 souls, hers in the memory of the one who came before. He fetched water from the barrel, left it beside her, lit the fire, closed the door behind him. Didn't ask her name. Didn't want hers either, Jonas. Poured himself 1 measure of whiskey, not for the cold, but for the tremor he felt deep in his chest. He didn't drink it, just held it. She didn't scream in the night. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She didn't eat the stew he left at the door either, but the cup of water was half empty by dawn. He rode into town the next day for kerosene. No one asked where he'd gone the night before, but he saw the squint in old man Pharaoh's eyes, the way the general store clerk hesitated before selling him a tin of coffee. One man spat. Another tipped his hat too politely. He said nothing back. Home, the girl was sitting up, barefoot, blanket wrapped around her. Watching the fire, she didn't flinch when he entered. She didn't speak. He placed a tin plate of cornbread and beans on the table. Walked out again. She didn't eat it. Not then. That night, sat on the porch in his rocking chair, the one his wife used to sit in, knitting with a shotgun across her knees. The stars were coming out one by one. The prairie smelled of ash and silence. Inside, she moved. He heard it. Not the sound of escape. Not a window lifted or a door creaked. Just the slow shifting of someone not yet ready to die. He rocked once, slow, then, again and again. The wind pushed against the cabin like an old regret, and Jonas Bly, who had seen men torn apart by war, watched a girl who said nothing but still breathed, and realized he wasn't alone anymore. He just wasn't sure if that was a mercy or a warning. The days passed like river stones silent, worn smooth by time and repetition. The Apache girl moved through the cabin like a shadow that didn't cast one. She slept little, ate even less. Jonas noticed the half-drunk cups of coffee, the untouched plates of beans, the way her feet barely stirred the dust on the floorboards. She made no sound when she walked, but the old dog that wandered the property still lifted its head when she passed. Uncertain whether to greet or grieve, Jonas said nothing most mornings. He'd rise before the sun, build the fire, set out a fresh tin cup of coffee, on the porch railing. Always hot. Always waiting. She never took it while he watched. But when he returned from tending the animals, the cup would be lighter. Not empty, but enough to know she'd touched it. That she hadn't run. He didn't know her name. She hadn't offered it. He didn't ask. He didn't sleep much either. Nights brought memories. It's the kind that crept in under the door frame like cold wind. His wife June had died during the winter outbreak smallpox that swept through the scattered towns like prairie fire. The local pastor said it was God's will. Jonas never believed that. He blamed himself. Her people did too. She had been half Navajo, half settler, married Jonas against her tribe's wishes. She had brought him peace for a while, taught him how to move through silence without making it feel like a punishment. After she died, he folded her shawl blue and gray wool, hand-woven with a single red thread through the fringe and placed it in the drawer beneath the bed. He hadn't touched it since, until the girl came. One morning, just after sunup, Jonas found her behind the barn, kneeling in the dirt. She had gathered sticks, thin ones, curved slightly, and tied them with rough twine to form a figure. 2 arms, a head, a body bent forward. It was no child's toy. It was something else. Symbol. He stopped 10 paces away, boot in the dirt. She looked up, no fear in her eyes, just distance. He said nothing. She placed the figure in the ground, gently, as if burying a story, and walked past him without a word. He didn't disturb it. That day, Jonas pulled the shawl from the drawer, sat on the edge of the bed holding it. It still smelled faintly of sage, firelight, her hair. He folded it again, slower this time, and returned it to its place, by dusk. The girl had disappeared. He found her out back, sitting in the tall grass beyond the fence line, staring at the sky as if waiting for something ancient to fall back down. Cold. Out, he said, voice soft, just above the wind. She didn't turn. He stepped closer, one hand on the post, the other hanging loose at his side. You're not what they say. Her eyes flickered, barely. Not enough to meet his, but enough to say she'd heard. He didn't expect a reply. Still, after a long pause, she murmured something low. In Apache, he understood just enough to catch the shape of it. Silence is safer, he nodded. That night he left 2 quilts folded at the end of her bed. She used both. The next morning she left the coffee cup empty for the first time. They settled into a rhythm made of things unsaid. He cleared the chicken coop. She swept the porch. He mended the barn roof. She gathered wild onions near the creek. Once, he found the stick figure placed carefully near the grave of his dog. A second had been added beside it. The ghosts in the house stirred but didn't rise. Neither did he. He began to watch her. From the corner of his eye, not in fear, but in the quiet wonder of someone witnessing a leaf finally fall after weeks of clinging to the branch, she moved differently now. Not confident, not free, but less like something hunted, still. There were scars. One night a wind slammed the barn door. A clean, sharp crack echoed through the land like gunfire. Jonas rushed outside, his lantern in hand. She was curled beneath the porch, shivering, his hands covering her ears. He didn't touch her, just knelt beside the boards and said, "Storm's past." Slowly, breath by breath, she looked at him. Her eyes glistened in the lantern light. She didn't cry, but she blinked slowly, like a girl remembering how. He sat with her until the fire in the sky had faded, and the only thing left was the hush of insects and the steady ticking of the windmill out near the fence line. In town, the rumors had started. Someone had seen Jonas riding with herber legs, wild hair, blood on her skin. Some said she was a spirit, others something worse. Jonas heard none of it directly, just the way voices quieted when he walked into the store. The way the sheriff glanced too long at his rifle belt. He paid it no mind. He had lived with worse than whispers. And so had she. They didn't yet trust each other. But there was a language between them, now braided from silence, coffee, and the space between footfalls. She left fresh herbs by the windowsill. He replaced her worn moccasins with a pair of boots that had once belonged to June. Neither said, "Thank you." They didn't need to. Some things, Jonas had come to believe, were sacred because they were unfinished. And this girl, this quiet soul with thunder beneath her ribs, was not done yet. The sky turned the color of old bruises by mid-afternoon, slate and violet, swollen with coming rain. It's the kind of storm that didn't ask permission. It's the kind that arrived with a roar and left the land changed. Jonas smelled it before he saw. It earth-shifting beneath pressure. A silence that grew too thick. Even the crows had vanished. He hammered the barn door shut with new hinges, tied the fence gates tight with rope, and tossed extra hay into the loft in case they'd be stuck indoors for days. He was halfway through stacking firewood near the porch when he heard a quiet rustling behind him. Tiva, she'd come barefoot, sleeves rolled to the elbows, carrying 2 squawking hens to the coop under her arm. She said nothing, just gave him a brief glance, neither soft nor cold, and ducked inside the shed to collect the last of the feed. He didn't thank her. She didn't ask for it. Together, without a word, they prepared for the sky to fall. By the time the first drop hit the porch rail, they'd finished. The wind came howling down from the north, heavy with the scent of juniper and wet stone. Jonas moved toward the cabin door when he saw the figure coming up the trail, a rider, broad hat, black coat, a badge that caught what little light the sky gave. Elgin Carr. Deputy, meaner than most snakes and twice as nosy. Jonas had crossed paths with him only a handful of times, enough to know Carr didn't care for people who didn't talk, didn't drink, and didn't beat the war drums of God and flag. Carr pulled his horse to a stop near the porch. Rain tapped like impatient fingers on his brim. "Well," he said, drawing the word like a dull knife. "Heard tell you picked up something on your way back from town last week?" Jonas said nothing, just leaned against the porch post, arms crossed. Carr chuckled. "Some say it was a dog. Others say it was a girl, brown-skinned, looked half dead, still." Jonas didn't speak. "You harboring runaways now, Bly?" Carr asked, spitting a long stream of tobacco into the dirt just inches from the porch steps. "Don't seem like something your dear June would approve of. She was a God-fearing woman, wasn't she?" Jonas's jaw didn't move, but his hand dropped subtly, naturally, to rest against the edge of the railing where the shotgun sat, leaned. Quiet and worn. Carr looked at him long. "You know, the law says if you're hiding anything, especially her kind, there's consequences." Jonas finally spoke. One word, flat as iron. "No." Carr narrowed his eyes. "No, you're not hiding anyone. No, you don't give a damn what the law says." Jonas didn't answer. Carr grinned without humor, tugged on the reins. "Be a shame if something bad found its way out here. Real shame." He turned his horse, flicked the reins, and rode off. Mud kicked from the hooves in every direction. Jonas didn't watch him go. The wind picked up. That night, the storm came with fury. Rain lashed the windows. Lightning forked across the sky like God was splitting the earth open just to see what bled. In the small bedroom, the girl tossed in her sleep. He heard her whimper, then screamed. It was a raw sound, ripped from somewhere deeper than lungs. The scream of a child left too long in a world that offered no reason. Jonas didn't go in. He sat just outside the door, a rifle across his knees, listening, waiting not to stop her dreams, but to stop whatever might come because of them. The fire hissed in the hearth, coughing sparks. The wind howled and guttered down the chimney. Somewhere far off, a tree cracked, split clean by lightning. The sound rolled over the land like thunder dragged across gravel. She didn't scream again, but her breathing came hard and fast for a long time. He stayed until the first blue edge of morning crept across the sky when he stepped onto the porch, to stretch his legs and breathe in something that wasn't fire smoke or memory. He saw it, a single feather, placed dead center on the porch rail, not dropped, placed deliberately. It was long, black-tipped, and bound at the base with a twist of red thread. He didn't touch it. Tiva stepped out minutes later, a blanket around her shoulders. She saw it too. Their eyes met. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. Some warnings didn't need voices to be heard. By mid-morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world scrubbed raw and new. The earth drank deeply. The horses stomped fresh mud. A rainbow barely appeared. then vanished behind the western ridge. But the feather remained. Tiva took it just before dusk and tucked it into the thatch. Above her window, a shield or a signal, Jonas didn't ask. He just sat on the porch as the sun bled down, listening to a silence filled now, not with ghosts, but with breathing. The silence inside the cabin began to change. Not vanish, just soften. It no longer pressed against the walls like a threat. It became something else. Shared room neither of them owned, but both began to live in. Tiva spoke one morning. A word, soft, almost hidden beneath the scrape of firewood. "Da," she said, pointing to the kettle. Jonas, halfway through splitting kindling, paused. He looked up. "Water," he said, slow and careful, nodding once. She didn't smile. "Right." She repeated the word, then again, as if testing its shape in her mouth. He filled the kettle. Over the next few days, she spoke more, always in short, precise Apache phrases. And he answered, when he could, in the pieces he remembered from scout patrols long ago. Some words came easier than others. The rest he let her correct with a glance or the tilt of her head. One evening, while she stirred beans over the fire, she began to hum. It wasn't a song he knew, but it wasn't mournful. It sounded like something woven stitched slowly, as if each note patched a torn place inside her. He didn't ask what it meant, just listened. When she stopped, he found himself missing the sound. Later that night, after she had gone to her room, Jonas stepped out onto the porch. He took a rag and oil, and for the first time in years cleaned the table out front. He cleared the old tools off the bench, swept the floorboards, sat down. Then he looked at the door across from him, his wife's old room, still shut, still, sealed. The next morning, he opened it. The dust came first, then the scent of something old and quiet. Worn dresses still hung on pegs. A basin sat by the window. The shawl had been moved to the drawer again. He left it there, but he opened the shutters. Let the light in. Tiva watched from the hallway. She said nothing. The changes were slow, deliberate. He started setting to places at the table, even if she ate after him. She started lighting the lanterns before he asked. Trust didn't come fast, but it came in pieces. Then, on dusk, as the sun spilled copper light across the porch, Jonas stepped outside to find something waiting. A single braid, tied from horsehair, in twine. Hung carefully from the porch post, he knew what it meant. Peace, not surrender, not trust, but peace. He looked at it for a long while, then went back inside, pulled the rifle from the mantel, and hung it beside the braid. That night, he left the door to his wife's room open. Just a crack. Tiva passed by it. Without flinching, they didn't speak of it until thunder came again, not from the sky, but from hooves on the trail. Jonas was feeding the fire when the clatter of a horse announced company. He opened the door slowly, and there was Carr again, drunk this time, slouched in the saddle. Hat crooked, shirt stained with something dark. He dismounted with a grunt, spit soaking into the dirt. "She's still here?" said, eyes glossy, voice loud. Jonas didn't answer. Carr stepped closer, wobbling a little. "I asked you a question, Bly." Behind Jonas, soft footsteps moved into the doorway. Tiva, she stood without flinching. A blanket draped around her shoulders. Her hair was loose. For once, the fire behind her painted her in gold and shadow. Carr blinked. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "You really are playing house with one of them, huh?" Jonas stepped forward once. "She's not leaving." Carr's mouth twitched. "Ain't your decision?" Jonas didn't move. "She's not leaving?" The silence that followed stretched too long. The only sound was the creak of Carr's leather boots as he shifted his weight, swaying just a little too much for someone ready to draw. Then he spit. "Right beside the steps? You gone soft?" he slurred. "She's gonna bring trouble." Jonas looked at him, eyes level, and let it come. Carr narrowed his eyes, wiped his mouth, and turned back to his horse. Said, "I won't be alone." He mounted clumsily, kicked the animal hard, and disappeared into the dusk. Jonas watched until the sound was gone. Behind him, Tiva remained in the doorway. She said nothing. He didn't turn, but he spoke, low and steady. "You got enemies. So do I." A pause. Then she said, in her quiet, halting English, "You stayed." He nodded once. "So did you." The braid on the porch post twisted in the breeze beside the rifle. Neither of them moved to take it down. The storm would come again. They both knew that now, but so would morning. The snow melted slow that year, dripping from the pine boughs like the land was weeping its last regrets. Then came the green, not loud but quiet. Buds along the fence posts. A thin layer of moss rising on the stones by the creek. Avena. Wind smelled different, softer somehow. Spring arrived in pieces. It's like everything else. Tiva no longer stood apart from the cabin. She moved with it, through it, tending to the soil with practiced hands. She planted beans, onions, and tobacco root. She touched the ground like it was something holy, and in her silence, Jonas heard the prayers. One morning, he noticed the shawl. It had been June's, hand-stitched in old greens and faded reds, folded for years in the cedar chest. Now it rested across Tiva's shoulders, loose but sure, as if it had found its shape again. He said nothing, but when she passed him on the porch, he held her gaze a moment longer than usual, and she didn't look away. They rode together sometimes. Now she sat astride the spare gelding like she'd been born to it. No words, just reins and nods and fence posts in need of mending. He didn't ask where she'd learned to ride so well. She didn't offer it. But they checked the northern ridge in tandem, side by side, like the land belonged to both and neither. One afternoon, came in from the fields and found something near his boots, a small carving bone, smoothed by hand into the shape of a horse. It stood barely 2 inches tall. Its tail was a tiny braid made from her own black hair, wrapped with red thread. He knelt and picked it up slowly. Didn't say a word, just slid it into the breast pocket of his shirt. Left it there. That evening, as the fire snapped and crackled in the hearth, he poured 2 cups of coffee instead of 1. She sat in the rocker, the shawl pulled tight around her shoulders. Her face was turned toward the flames, eyes unreadable. Then quietly she spoke. "They hung me for stealing corn." Her voice was unsure, like boots on a half-frozen creek. But it held. He didn't move. Let the fire fill the space between her. Words, "I was hungry," she said. "The old man who caught me, he tied the rope." The others watched. Jonas waited. She didn't cry, but her jaw tightened. Her hands gripped the arms of the chair so hard her knuckles paled. He leaned forward, voice steady. "They tried to hang me too." She looked up, startled. "For loving the wrong woman," he added. "Wasn't Apache. Wasn't white either. She was just mine." Silence again. Not the cold kind. The kind that listened. Tiva blinked slowly. "Did they kill her?" He nodded. "Smallpox came first. Blame came after." She didn't speak for a long time. Neither did he. The firelight danced between them, casting their shadows high on the log walls. Outside, the wind had quieted. Even the night seemed to be holding its breath. Their hands rested close on the bench between them, his fingers calloused and cracked from years of fence work. Hers, small, scarred, steady. She didn't pull away when his little finger touched hers. He didn't speak. Neither did she. But something passed between them in that moment. Not desire, not yet permission, or maybe recognition. That night, when he rose and placed a new log on the fire, she didn't go to her room. She just sat there, warm shawl around her. The bone horse nestled on the mantel now beside a worn horseshoe and a cracked tin cup. He stood beside her a moment longer than needed. Then turned and left her in peace. In the morning, when he stepped onto the porch, second braid had joined the first, this one thinner, tied with white thread. The rifle still hung there, but it was no longer the loudest thing on the wall. The wind blew dry and hard that morning, the kind that scraped the earth bare and whispered of something coming. Tiva felt it first. She stood at the garden fence, hands in the soil, when her head turned slightly, a breath held. a tremor in the earth that only old souls could feel. Jonas stepped out from the barn, wiping his hands. He followed her eyes. 3 riders. Carr led them. His hat sat low, his coat open, his boots dusted from the trail. Behind him rode 2 men Jonas didn't recognize, but their posture told him enough. One held a rope coiled at his side. The other carried a paper folded, fluttering slightly. A bounty. Tiva stepped back. Jonas didn't shout, didn't threaten. He simply said, "Stay inside." And then he mounted up, not toward the riders, but toward town. No rifle across his back, just a folded piece of wood tucked. Beneath his arm, the old sign, the one he'd buried under stone the day he found her. By the time Carr reached the gate, the cabin was empty. No voice answered, no curtain moved. Just the braids swinging on the porch, at the rifle, still hanging silent beside them. Jonas's horse kicked up dust on the trail all the way into town. When he arrived, he tied the reins. Outside the sheriff's office, like he had every right to be there, the door creaked open beneath his hand, and the whole room looked up. 2 deputies paused mid-conversation. The sheriff, an old man with a long scar and tired eyes, leaned back in his chair. Jonas walked in slow, didn't say a word. He placed the sign on the desk like a gravestone, "White man don't forgive." The words were cracked now, faded, but they still screamed. Jonas looked the sheriff dead in the eye. "You want justice?" said, "Start with this." The room was dead quiet. The sheriff stared down at the sign, jaw tight.
Right.
Once, then twice. Jonas didn't move. "You brought her home," the sheriff said finally. "Knowing what they'd done, buried what they left of her dignity," Jonas replied. "You gonna tell me that's a crime?" One of the deputies looked away. The other scratched the back of his neck, as if suddenly ashamed of the badge. On his chest, Jonas leaned in, voice like flint striking stone. "That girl never stole a damn thing, but they stole her name, her tribe, her breath. Damn. And they tried to hang her for it." The sheriff's eyes didn't meet his. Jonas stepped back. "If you're going to hang me for harboring someone," he said, "make damn sure you hang them too." He left the sign there on the desk. Didn't wait for a reply. Outside, people had gathered, drawn by the sound of a man who didn't whisper when the truth hurt. Now, whispers turned to talk. Talk turned to outrage. By sundown, story had spread across the valley like wildfire and dry grass. By sunrise, Carr was gone, vanished. His land stood empty, his horse untied. Some say he ran, others say the earth swallowed him whole. Jonas didn't. He just rode home when he reached the porch. Tiva sat there waiting. She wore the shawl wrapped tight across her shoulders, her hair parted into 2 long braids. A pot of coffee steamed on the step beside her. Tin cup sat untouched, still hot. Jonas dismounted slow, boots crunching on gravel. She didn't stand, just looked at him. Their eyes met. Not with surprise, but with a knowing that didn't need to be spoken. He sat beside her. Neither of them reached for the coffee, not yet. The land was quiet, the kind of quiet that only came after things broke open and the wind came in to carry off what didn't belong. After a while, she spoke. "Where? Do we go now?" He didn't answer right away. Then he reached for the cup. "Anywhere you want," he said, "so long as there's coffee." She smiled, just barely. But it was the kind of smile that didn't vanish when the moment passed. The kind that stayed like footprints in packed earth. Together, they packed their things in silence. They left the porch braids where they were, left the rifle hanging, left the sign behind on a sheriff's desk. They didn't ride away from the past, they carried it with them, braided into their hair, etched into their silence, and when the wind blew, carried their story not as a warning, but as something earned, something true, something just.